Hey, I'm Alec Miller, founder of Rosen Rogues, and today I'm going to teach you how to turn your face into a sandstorm monster. A monster in a sandstorm face thing. I'm going to teach you how to break down and remake effects. So one of my core childhood memories is going to Costco, and while my parents were shopping for the pair of jeans that I'd be wearing for the next 10 years, I and my siblings would go to the big screen TV section and we'd go watch whatever blockbuster had come out that summer. Now, oftentimes this is the only way I got to watch a blockbuster on a large screen, as I was like 8 or 9 years old, and a lot of times it'd be like too scary or we just didn't go see them. And in the 1999, this was the case. This was the year that the blockbuster hit The Mummy was released, and I didn't get to see it in theaters because it was too scary. And there were in fact scenes that still frighten me to this day, like when the scarabs go underneath the skin of the characters. That still bothers me. However, there's also other scenes in that movie that were just extremely cool. There's one scene in particular that VFX artists and creative types, I guess, people into CGI still think about to this day, and that's the sandstorm. The face coming out of the sandstorm. It's so iconic. It's the cover of the VHS. It's on t-shirts. It's, even if you've never seen the movie, you probably know of this scene. It's just that iconic. And I was thinking about it the other day and how cool of a scene it is, and how childhood me sat there watching it and I wish I could have put my face into that sandstorm, right? Like I wanted to, after you watch the movie, you're like running around going like, and you're like, what? Could I do that? Is that something I could do today? Like maybe it's an effect I could recreate. The first challenge is how do I get my face into the sandstorm? And the second challenge is, can I do this with my own spin on it? What would I do differently? Where the value to me comes for you guys is kind of teaching you how to do a challenge like this. If you see a scene, how to break it down. The number one thing I get DM'd, and yes, I get DM'd even though I only have like 500 subscribers, which thank you guys so much, by the way. Every single one means the world to me. People usually ask me how to break down an effect. There's some sort of effect they want to recreate, and they go, well, how is this made? Can you break it down? So what I want to do is kind of teach you those skills of how to look at something and then think about ways of recreating or doing your own spin on it. What I don't like doing in tutorials is giving you every single little button to push. What I'd like to teach instead of which buttons to push is how to problem solve. And so the first question is like, where do you start? Where do you start when you have something like this? And the answer is always 1,000% of the time, reference. You're going to hear me say this over and over again. Every single artist is going to say this: reference, reference, reference. You're only as good as your input. Bad input, bad outputs. So that's where we're going to start, is our reference. And there happens to be two really good places to start. One is obviously The Mummy, right? We're trying to recreate this effect, so we're going to look at their effect. And the next is going to be the, I think, more important bit of reference, which is real life footage. That's the best reference. Even better is if you can go there in person. So let's take a look at The Mummy here, and let's see what we got going on. So here's the scene of the sandstorm. They get kicked out. Imhotep is traveling with them. They're flying in an airplane, and he wants to stop them. So he summons the sandstorm from the ground. So that's where we're at. Brendan Fraser sees it. He tells his buddy a quip, pedal faster, and you see them come over this crest, and here's where the effect really starts. So here we have it. It bursts over this thing. The masking's okay, but I won't really worry about that. We're not going to recreate that part of this. And it crashes down. And the first thing you notice already is this is like a thick sandstorm. You can see the sky up here at the very, very top, but you can't see any sky through the main body of the sandstorm at all. So that's something to take note of. That's an art direction choice that they took with this. The other thing you're going to notice is like how heavy this sand is. That's one of the things I noticed too, just thinking about the scene, is it's constantly falling down. It's just moving in this downward kind of, showering down all over the place. Over his face, it's kind of moving around and down. Brendan Fraser takes some shots at it, hoping that's going to do something, which obviously it's not. This is a really cool effect. I'm not going to recreate it today, I don't think. It's a little too much to ask of a short tutorial. It is really cool that I have that interaction, which I'm sure was hell to great. Not only does this thing have to move, not only does it have to show his face, but it also has to be able to be shot. Okay. One of the things you do notice with this is how detailed the sim is, right? You can make out the teeth and his nose hairs and stuff. Every little bit is very detailed. And there's obviously multiple sims, right? There's the far away shot sim and the close sim. So he opens it, does the whole swallow thing, And you get this side, and this is a really weird art direction for me. This is probably one of the weirdest choices they did. It's almost like this is a sand wave and not exactly a sandstorm. And you're gonna see when we look at the next bit of reference why. And there's this little bit of here that's kind of curling up at the bottom, but this whole thing is kind of coming down and over. Even though you would expect if the wind's moving this way, it's traveling forward, you would think that the stuff at the top here would go backwards, right? It'd be kind of cresting backwards rather than forwards, but it doesn't do that, which is sort of interesting. So it doesn't really follow physics kind of at all, which is a bit of a shame to me. And so one of the things I want to point out is you have this scene here, right, where it's like all thick. You can see how thick this is. No light's getting into it. It's really dark. It's kind of muted. There's not a lot of contrast. But then this very next scene, they use real practical effects. And the real practical effects are completely different, right? There's all this detail in it, and there's these verticals down here causing these swirly effects. But here, like, you're getting some penetration, right? The light's shining through. You get some kind of subsurface lighting, as it were, right? It's like there's a volume that's being actually lit here. And this just has to do with the way they did it. They weren't using a proper volume and lighting the volume. I don't even think VDVs existed back then. So what they were using is a bunch of particles and then shining like a light on all these like little groups of particles, which looks cool. It looked good, but this looks so much better than the like this blobby thing here. So we're gonna try to look at real life reference, because as you saw, the real life stuff looks so cool. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and so we have actual dust storms that regularly happen in the dusty or drier months, right, in the summer and during our monsoon season. And we call them haboobs. That's just what they're called. These haboobs come and they're awesome. They're these awesome storms, and they'd be really good for reference. Unfortunately, it's not haboob season, and even if it was, I wouldn't want to stand outside in order to get my own reference. However, there's a local storm chaser called Mike Oblinski, and he does amazing work. I highly recommend giving him a follow for reference of storms and lightning strikes, and he does all sorts of weather photography and videography, and it's amazing. He's won all sorts of awards for it. I highly recommend giving that guy a follow. So he's happened to have uploaded a video to YouTube called Haboob, A Decade of Dust, and it's in 4K nonetheless. So we have a 4K video reference that we can look at to see real dust storms. And this is the key. This is what you need to be looking for as a VFX or CG artist, is trying to, just any filmmaker, frankly, any sort of artist, look for really solid reference. And this is about as good as you get. So let's take a look at this reference. As we go forward, we see this first dust storm, and right away you'll notice it is way more wispy. Like there's all sorts of wispiness going on. It's not this thick wall that you can't even see through at all. There's a lot of micro detail. So we're pretty far away. Let's get a little closer. So boom, right away, what was I saying before? Like you couldn't see through it at all. And now you look, you can see the sky through certain areas. And even the darker areas, they still have a lot of light penetrating through, coming in and causing this kind of very cloud-like, more volume lighting. The other thing you get is the scale of these things. The other one, it's kind of hard to understand the scale. You had like the little airplane, and that's about it. But these things, the scale of them is, these are whole buildings, are just tiny comparison. So again, you're getting like a lot more cloud-like storm, right? With these little trails here. And again, remember what I said when I said it looked really weird being like this wave that was dropping dust down? This is the inverse, right? You see that it's going backwards. The wind's pushing it. So it's moving forward. The wind's pushing it down here at the bottom. But as it moves, it's trailing off backwards and to the right, which is what you'd expect to happen, as opposed to this wave, this watery wave of dust, which my guess is what they did is they looked at a bunch of water waves for the reference, because this footage didn't exist at the time, and seeing an actual haboob and getting a recording of a haboob in 1999 was probably like nigh impossible. And the other reference they probably used was like pouring sand, actual sand over something. So they probably had like a model of a face. In fact, I think they do this effect later on where you have like the model of a face or something, you pour sand over it to see how it moves, right? Which is why that's so detailed, but it doesn't really look like an actual dust storm. Here's a really good one. You get some really cool designs coming in. It's very turbulent. There's a lot of miniature storm going on within the storm. And the other thing we want to have, I think that they missed out on, and it's just a lack of technology at the time, it's more vorticity happening. Right here, you see all this like turbulence, and you see how varied it is. You get the micro stuff, and you get the really big stuff, and then you get the little wispies at the top turning and rotating all over the place. This is amazing. This is such beautiful footage. And thank you, Mike. Give him a like and a follow. give me a like and a follow. This is a lot of work. This is taking me months to put together, just so you know. So if you appreciate, if you like this stuff, then hit me up. And let's be friends. A couple things take away: more light penetration, less just pure wall of dirt, more variation in size and of the kind of displacement, as it were, make it more cloud-like. Add at the edges a whole bunch of wispies. The other thing is the angle, right? Having it go over and back rather than forward like a wave. We're gonna have it go back like a cloud of dust. Oh golly, it's gorgeous. And Mike's just sitting here like he's probably in his car, but this dust storm's just coming at him, and he's like, I want to leave my camera out there. Hopefully it survives. Hopefully I can dust it off. I think that's enough looking at our reference for now. How do I actually go about problem solving creating this? And you have to break it down into sections. So one thing I need is I need my face, and I need it to be a digital asset. I need it to be a 3D model, and to have a performance captured, because I want it to be like my face. So I got to figure out how to do that. And then step number 2 is, how do I create the clouds in the simulation? And there's a number of tools we could look at, and I'll tell you which one I decided on and why. So first, for the face, what I ended up using is Maxon's Moves by Maxon. It's a little redundant, but Moves by Maxon is an app for the iPhone and iPad, which uses the dual cameras, wherever those are, the dual cameras on this side. It uses the dual cameras and the infrared sensor to capture your face. Now, there are other tools for doing face capture on phones and whatnot, and there's ones that support Android, but they all cost money, and I already own Maxon Cinema 4D, and so if I'm already paying them, I might as well use this software. I will say this is one of the things that delayed this tutorial for so long, is their software is broken. It wouldn't import properly from the app to the program, but with the latest update of Maxon Cinema 4D and the app, it all now works fantastic. It's a pretty cool little app. I'm not going to go do a full tutorial, but it's pretty straightforward. So if you look, I'm going to turn around so you guys can see this. So if you look, it sees my face, and it's going to create a mesh where my face is. And then I can simply capture that. So I just simply look at this. I go, there's my face. I hit record. I go, rah, right? I go, rah, a couple times. I like the performance. If it looks good, right? You can see it even works for like talking. You can say a bunch of things and it will capture it. It'll capture the things you're saying, which is kind of cool. And then I'm gonna hit record. We're gonna stop that. I can play it back, and you can see right away I have a 3D version of my face. So I can hit 3D and I can move around and see that there's my face in 3D. There's a better way of capturing this, I'm sure, but I'm just gonna do this the lazy way because I don't really care. You can see my lights reflecting there. So you see my face there in 3D. I can move around. I can do whatever I want with my face, but it's all there. It's all captured. And you can see it in 2D, and then I can see my performance as well is also recorded. So that's that. From there, you just kind of hit the upload button, and then you send it to your computer, right? You hook up your computer's IP to the app, and then it works. It's magic. It's kind of magical. So now that I have my face in the computer, now that I have my capture, how are we going to generate this other effect? How are we going to generate this smoke? What are we going to do? So what I ended up choosing to do is using my good old trusted software, EmberGen. Now there's a number of reasons why I chose EmberGen. Reason number 1 is because I simply just love those frickin' guys. Like, the whole team over at VFX are awesome. The founder just made a video where he was just super open. I cried watching it as someone that runs my own company and wants to do similar things. I believe in paying people well and treating them well. I try not to make them work weekends. I'm sorry, James, you're like the only one. But everybody else, I try really hard not to make work weekends. And it really speaks to me. So I love those guys at Django. So that's the first reason. The next reason why is they do really cool real-time sims, and you can import geometry. And it's also not like a whole nother giant ecosystem I have to get into. So it's not Houdini. It's not, some other VFX pipeline, Maya or something, where I have to learn all this stuff. I like working in Cinema 4D. That's where I ended up. I know it's like the casual guys 3D software, that and like Blender. And the other thing I like about EmberGen is it's sort of agnostic. And I really want to create this agnostic production workflow where I don't really want to care what software you use. My dream world is like, I really hope that Universal the USD, right, Universal Screen Description, I think it's called, is supported more and more, because I really want to live in this world where you go, I'm a Blender artist, and I go, well, I'm a Cinema 4D artist. Someone else goes, well, I'm a Houdini artist, and it doesn't matter. We can just all share assets, and they work, out of the box with each other, and they're going to look the same. So that's my dream world. And this seems to be a push in that direction. And it can create some really cool stuff very quickly. And that's the other thing, is I'm all about speed right now. I think that the way the industry is headed, if you're not doing like large production visual effects, really speed is the game. You want to be able to get stuff out quickly to your audience, to YouTube, to whatever you're working towards. You're going to have short production timelines, and you need to be able to do it with like a tiny skeleton crew. And so that's the other thing I really like about EmberGen, is I don't need to have like a render farm or a whole bunch of horsepower. I can just take my personal machine and do all the work there myself. And it's only getting better like by the day. So that's all the reasons why I chose EmberGen. But you could do this in a number of different ways, right? You could choose your own way. Another option would be like, you could get your face in there and then use particular or stardust once you have the 3D model to like generate it that way. And so you have to think about what tools you have and then how you can solve using the tools you have. Now we're going to jump in to our 3D programs and take a look around about what I did in order to kind of create this face effect. Okay, remember how I told you I wasn't going to tell you every single button to push? Well, here we are in Cinema 4D, and I'm just going to go over the high level stuff that you need to know. Don't worry, you'll be able to figure it out. Trust me, you're smart. So we're starting with moves by Maxon, like I said. You're just going to open it up. You're going to find your take, and you're just going to double click it. Boom. It's as easy as that. And now you have your face, in this case, my face, captured in beautiful 3D and ready to go. This is more or less all I did. I just brought this in, exported out the animation here. I got rid of the eyes because I wanted the eyes to have the sand to sink into the eyes. And I just rendered this out as an alembic, or you could probably even get away with maybe an animated FBX. This worked out pretty well. You have to play around with the settings when you're exporting, obviously, depending on what program you're using, how detailed this is. This is pretty straightforward. It's just a single mesh. So that's pretty straightforward. The sand wall, though, is the other thing I have to make. And this is how I created that. Originally, I had this idea with this collider. So it's just a shape. It's just a basic shape. But I wanted to have the face kind of pop out of it. So originally I had this whole effect where this face popped out of the thing, and it's a cool effect, and it actually looks pretty good. I'll show you some samples of how it turned out, but it was causing issues. And I was reminded of my own words in a previous tutorial where I said, don't have one simulation do everything. And so I kept running into these troubles by having one simulation trying to do everything, which was I couldn't get the face detailed enough while also getting the wall looking large enough and being really complex. The more complexity I added to the wall, it would also add it to the face, but I kind of wanted the face to be more smooth. So then I thought, why am I trying to do this as one sim? And so that's a good lesson to you guys. If you're running into a wall and you keep hitting problem the way you're doing it, simply don't do it that way. Ask yourself, is there another way I can do this? Does this all need to be in one massively huge sim, or can I do the wall in one sim and then the face in another sim, which is what I ended up doing. So I got my generic shape together by just taking a common root cube. So you just push it and pull it using whatever sculpting tools you have. From there, I added a large displacement, which is gonna make the outsides kind of move around. And that's being motivated very simply by a noise shader. I have a pretty high contrast and the scale is at 300%. And that's just so it's nice and big, right? So this applies to anything. You could do this in any program. You can make it noise however you want. It's a fundamental building block of all visual effects. On top of that, I have, guess what? Another noise. Now this noise is being motivated by a vertex map, which you can see here. And because I didn't want it to affect the main face of the piece, I just wanted it to affect the sides and the tops. So that way, that stuff all moves and this doesn't. And that's, again, universal. No matter what program you're going to use, you have vertex maps and you can paint them. But that's what's motivating this displacement down here, so that it only affects the parts I want it to affect. And the other thing is it's only affecting it vertically. You'll notice they're not really moving horizontally. It's just vertically, because I didn't want it to just go all over the place. I just wanted it to move up and down, so that way this wasn't a static wall. The next thing that's being affected is another displacer. What do you know? I'm so original. Third displacer. Now this one is displacing everything all over the place, and it's adding some extra detail all over this model. Last but not least, I'm adding a smoothing effect because it all needs to be smoothed out. And as you probably noticed, there's a few little glitches happening, some right angles that are kind of punching out in weird ways. And this smoother really helps that out. Again, all of these things are gonna be in whatever program you're using. These are just what they are called in Cinema 4D. All of these working together create this nice little sand wall with some variation and movement that has enough organicness to it that it's going to make a really good base for our sim. Now that I have this full model, all I need to do is file, export, and I'm going to export as an alembic. So this is where it all comes together and our reference really pays off. Now remember, I'm not going to give you guys every single button to push. One of the reasons for that is all this is about to change. EmberGen's going through some updates, and so will any software you like to use. So it's far more important to understand why you're making the changes you're making rather than what buttons to push. So that's what I'm going to give you, why instead of how. Obviously, the first thing we're going to need to do is bring in our shape. So we're going to get rid of their shape and connect our imported shape. You just need to locate it using the file path. I happen to already had it linked up. We're going to bring it down. You're going to have to shape it however you need. If you can't see it at all, one thing I will say you want to do is just hit scale to simulation, and that'll make it more or less the right size. And then from there, you can make it smaller or bigger until it fits. That's getting close, but I think actually our simulation's a little small. So we're gonna go into our simulation tab here, and we're gonna up the size of this sim. There we go. Now, if you don't know how big it is, you can hit B to see the bounding box, and that'll tell you. So now it's really, thin and tall, but we don't really need it to be that tall. So we're gonna change the height, and we're gonna make it a lot longer. So obviously right now it's all on fire, and we don't need that either. So I'm gonna go to our emitter, I'm gonna go to emission, and I'm gonna grab our fuel rate and drop that down. We can still see the model, but we can also get rid of that by hitting H, which will get rid of our model preview. So now we've kind of got our sim the way we want it. I don't really like a few things right now. Let's tweak them. That's the light. We want to rotate our sunlight here around. So I'm just gonna click on the sunlight here, and then I'm gonna click on rotation. I'm gonna rotate it so that's kind of facing the way we want. And then what we can do is change the color of this sand. There's a really easy way to do that. You just gonna go to shading and then smoke color. Now, I don't exactly know what color sand is off the top of my head, so I'm gonna go over to Adobe Color, so it's color.adobe.com, and I just searched and found this sand color. It's pretty easy. And we're actually gonna do a color ramp. We'll get 2 colors. So the minimum color, I want to be this dark color, and then the maximum color, I want to be a lighter color. And there we have it. That's looking a lot more sand-like. I'm gonna go over a few more settings for setting up this, and then I'm gonna go into the details about why our reference matters so much. We're gonna need to turn up our smoke rate because we don't have nearly enough. So we're gonna turn that up, and that's giving us a lot more. You'll notice it's going really, really crazy. And one of the things that makes it go crazy is this kind of hidden effect in forces called velocity transfer. And by default, that's at 100%. And what that means is if you have a model, if you have something dancing around, it's going to be affecting the simulation. The velocity of your model is going to be transferred to the sim. So we want to turn that way, 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 way down to like 2. The other thing you'll notice is we still have this force noise turned on. I'm just going to disconnect that. We don't need that. And then we can start looking at our reference. Now we kind of got our sand set up. So what's the first thing our reference did? Well, we remember it was a lot heavier in the Mummy and in the effects we looked at, and in the real footage, this stuff wasn't flying straight up to the sky. It was kind of really heavy sand. And so we want to go to our simulation. We're going to go to force, and we're going to turn off the buoyancy, and we're going to turn up the smoke weight. All right, so now it's all piling down at the bottom. And already this is starting to look a lot more like a sand wall. The next thing we're going to want to do is remember, it kind of had that like up and over effect. One thing I'm going to do is probably rotate our model a little bit so the angle works better for me. And then from there, what we can do in our simulation, we can go to forces, we can add in some wind, and we can up the wind a little bit. So we can move this up until it starts kind of flowing backwards the way we want it to go. Oh, look at that. And we can turn up the chaos of the wind so it's not so even. And it happens to already be in the right direction, but if it isn't, then just look at your orientation and then act accordingly. As you'll notice, it's still pretty thick. And what's causing this thickness is 2 things. It's going to be our emission rate. That's one reason. But the other reason that this is going to be really thick is if you go to other, when you click on your imported shape, you'll notice there's a thickness emission. And what that is how thick the walls of your model are that you imported. So right now you can see it's pretty thick. If I thin this down a lot more, you'll notice it's getting thinner. And so now when I restart it, you'll see that it's a lot thinner. And you can go as thin or as thick as you want with this. So now that we have that going, we kind of got the basics, but there's a few things we're missing. One is going to be vorticity. Turning that up is going to give us a lot more kind of this turbulent look that we sort of want. And there's large and small vorticity. You're going to notice both of those. And playing with those is also going to give you a sense of scale, you'll notice. I don't know if you can hear my cat. So now that I've walked you through how to get this whole thing set up, what's going to really take it to the next level? Well, again, it's going to be looking at our reference and then trying to emulate that as best we can, the things we want from it. So if you notice, there's a few things I have here. I'm going to turn them all off. So this is pretty much what we had before in the last one. There's stuff going, it's all flowing backwards the way we want, and it's got some nice turbulence going on, but there's a few things missing. So one thing is the wind has a bit more chaos to it, meaning it's not all blowing exactly the same speed, exactly the same way. It's kind of blowing in different ways, and it's pretty easy to control in your simulation wind, and you can look, the chaos is really high. I have it like 600. You got some nice chaos going on there, and the wind's all really low. The next thing that you'll notice that we have going on is going to be this force noise, and that's heading into our emitter. So the emitter isn't just going to emit straight, it's going to emit a little bit noisy, right? So there's this pattern being fed into it, and it's going to create a little bit more micro detail. So that's really useful as well. The next thing we have going on is our force line. And what that's doing is, you'll notice right away, it pushes it upwards. So that force line is pushing all of our simulation up. So it's going up and back. And that's really emphasizing that shape that we wanted before, where it really crests over the top rather than kind of being this super clean, straightforward line. And then the last effect that we wanted to do from our reference that really is going to make this look exactly what we want is our force vorticals. So what our vorticals are doing is they're a bunch of mini tornadoes that were shooting into the scene in a semicircle kind of all around the edges of this simulation. And what that's going to do is create these little tornado effects that you see going on, right? So that's going to be because there's a vortical hitting it and making it twist around. So that's where you get all these cool little micro details coming in here, creating these little spinny tornado-y effects that we love so much. So that's how I made this look a lot more like our reference footage that we had, as well as keeping some of the things that we really liked from the original Mummy sim. Now, you can go as crazy as you want or as low as you want. You can add more vorticals. You can make this crazy. You can take it into your render engine. That's really all there is to it. That's how I kind of problem solved this and got this all set up into this cool effect that we decided to make. Now, as far as the face goes, I'll show you that as well, just for fun. But to be honest, it's the same exact sim. So I took the same sim and just brought the face in instead. Now, there's a few things I did with the face. Obviously, there's a bit more turbulence, a bit more detail. It's larger, it's taking up more space in the bounding box here. So it's not the size it would be. I can shrink it down and post, and that will make it have a little more detail as well. And so this really shows you why I like teaching concepts and not buttons. I like to teach whys and not hows, because you could take this same exact effect, the same idea that I've just kind of taught you, and you can apply this to, like, I don't know, a flaming skull, let's say, an effect from a video game like Elden Ring. And there you have it. You can take this one thing and do a lot with it. Now, all that's left to do is bring this into a render engine, render it out, and see how it looks. So there you have it. It took a few days. Obviously, I'm wearing a new outfit, hat, and new headphones, but I was able to get it done, and I'm pretty happy with the results. I was able to complete my challenge and put my own face into the sim, as well as put my own spin on it, applying everything that we learned from our reference and from studying the Mummy and actual sandstorms. Of course, there are some tweaks I'd still love to make. Nothing's ever finished, it's just done. In particularly, I'd love to go back and see if I can get my original vision for the face and the wall working together in one sim to really bring some cohesion to the whole thing. That being said, this needs to be done. I have other things that I really need to be working on, and this has already taken up enough time. Us at Royals and Rogues have been working on a short film that I think you guys are really gonna love, and I wanna break down the entire process of how to make a digital short film from pre-concept through distribution. We're currently in the middle of production, and so there's plenty of lessons I already have to teach you, and then you guys are gonna be getting caught up to where I'm at as we go through this series together. I think it's gonna be really valuable if you're someone that's looking to get into digital short filmmaking. And if you're someone that's normally a consumer of digital short films, it's gonna be very insightful to see how things work behind the scenes. It's been really, really insightful for me, and I wanna share those insights with all of you. So hit subscribe if that's something that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.